Hello, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so excited to be here, Ricky.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. I would absolutely love to know about little Stephanie. What was she like and what did she dream about?
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point. Well, just a little bit of like context about me and my family. So I am the first child and the first grandchild of a first generation home. So a lot of firsts. And so naturally, I took on responsibilities very early on in life. I grew up in a very competitive, very education first environment. My family comes from Nigeria. And, my mom and dad immigrated here for better opportunities in the 90s. And so being a first generation and seeing so much success around me, um, I feel like little Stephanie always wanted to be successful, always wanted to be better than her parents, right? And so that for me was getting an opportunity in law or medicine or being an engineer. Didn't really know what I wanted to do at a younger age, but I knew that I just wanted to be someone important and make impact. So that was a little bit about me when I was younger. And it really just puts me into where I am today.
I love that so much. And what you shared about wanting to make an impact and wanting to be important, I resonate with that so deeply. And it's that inner sense of power that comes from the recognition of making that impact, which I think is so wonderful. And what's so cool is that you've built this career that spans sales, operations, marketing, and now entrepreneurship, building your own thing.
Mhm.
Looking back and thinking about little Stephanie, was there a through line that you can see now that maybe you couldn't see then?
That's a good one. I think growing up, like I had mentioned, I always wanted to like make impact. I always wanted to be helpful. I wanted to bring value to people's lives. And I was always a people person. Just being again a first child, also a first immigrant child. Like I was literally at the forefront of helping my parents figure out what it was being in America, right? What the status quo was, like literally how to really operate in this new environment. And, it's my first life too, and it's also theirs. But, that said, like I look back now and it's like my curiosity, like my people, like my love for people, being able to problem solve. These were a lot of things that really centered my love for, business and my eventual love for like being in sales and strategy and marketing. And so that curiosity across multiple disciplines really allowed me to lean into this role later on in life. I feel like it was a desire to really like build, connect, and create value that really like showcase itself when I decided to leave the route of medicine and go towards a more non-traditional route in business. So I would say those were some of the things like looking now, right? Like the writing was on the wall, but I just didn't know it at the time because, like I said, the majority of my family, like they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're engineers, and that's partially because those were the only opportunities to have a real way of, making it out of, a third world country such as Nigeria. So, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to embrace this other side of me in this, like in America. And I'm so happy that I'm so involved with the role that I am in now.
You mentioned that feeling of knowing and transitioning away from this path that you were on.
Mhm.
How did that moment really feel inside of your body when you really chose to make that transition and really commit to this new path that we talked about that spans all of these incredible things?
Yeah, it's definitely scary. It's an unknown as well because for so long it's been ingrained in my head that, you really have one of three choices, right? And so it's like, well, I like science, so I'm going to just do this. And I didn't really feel like I had an opportunity to really explore other career options when I was going to college initially. And so during COVID, like having that standstill in the world, right? Where everything was super uncertain, super messy. I was like, honestly, like it's now or never. And so it really did feel like I was losing an identity that I used to work towards, right? Like for the longest time, I had always told, my family members or, people I knew, like, hey, like, I'm going to be a doctor. Like I was pursuing it. Like I got like my first degree in biochem. And then once I felt like, hey, like the world's ending, right? Like at least let me live a little bit. I was totally fine with, feeling like I could reinvent myself and kind of peel away from that shell. And that really forced the pivot. And I'm so happy for, to be careful with that, but I'm very grateful for the pandemic and the way that it allowed so many other people to really embrace these opportunities that they probably wouldn't have had the courage to otherwise do in a different environment. And so it's growing pains, right? But now I feel like I'm living in the space that I once prayed for.
I love that so much. And the show is about reinvention, amongst other things. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
so grateful to have you on. Now, in your corporate journey, you sit at this intersection of being a woman and being a
Yes.
Black woman in corporate America. How has that shaped your experience in ways that don't always make it into the conversation?
Yeah. I think that's a great one because for as long as I've been aware, um, I've been, like an immigrant first, right? Not truly American, not truly, fitting into what it meant to be Black, right? But also not truly fitting into the African space and what it means to be African. When I would go home, people would see me super Americanized, but in school, and mind you, I went to a very undiverse school here in the Bay Area. People had an expectation for what my Blackness would be like. And on top of that, like being a woman, right? And so for as long as I can remember, my race had always been something that I had grappled with. Coming into the corporate space, it was interesting because it played out differently for me. Because the sense of like my my gender started to also appear, not in like my early onset career, but when I got into leadership, right? And so I began to have issues where I became aware of the inequity that I was facing or being really held to a higher standard than my other peers. Like I had a few other male colleagues who were also in leadership, and although they were missing quota quarter after quarter, they were finding progression in their career. Whereas for me, I never missed a quarter for 7 years of my life. And I had to fight to sit at the table. And sometimes you think about it and it's like, well, is it this or is it that? And really, it really is a combination of all of these different things playing a factor. And so being in that corporate space, it really showed me that, of course, there are going to be these like issues and hardships that you're going to deal with, but I always feel confident in standing in my power. And because I'm in a role that's very quantifiable, it has really helped me to be like, and so what, right? I'm a Black woman, I'm a young Black woman, and so what? I'm still whooping you guys when it comes to quota. I'm still over attaining. I'm still driving a strong team. I'm still hiring top talent. We're still going to President's Club. So why am I not getting this opportunity? And so when you're able to stand in your power and really push people to, I guess, understand and see their own, maybe their own biases, right? It helped me create actually really good relationships. I know it sounds weird, but I have had some of my best relationships with individuals and leaders who maybe were once opposed to me joining the team, right? And after showcasing the amount of impact that can drive, right? You don't argue with numbers. So it's definitely been an interesting thing being in corporate America and really seeing, you know, this issue of like your intersectionality really playing in front of you, but to like, my own right story, because of the way that I've been able to combat it, right? Not really through a dismissive way, but really through, I think, a respectfully combative way. Like, hey, you can't argue with these things. So now what? Has really been able to allow me to continue to propel my career forward.
I love that so much. And power is one of my words for this season.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved how you talked about standing in your power. And I would love to tease that out a little bit more. You've touched on bits of it already, but unpacking it both emotionally and what it looks like tactically and strategically. And so, emotionally, there's this sense of that first wave of noticing a disparity
Mm-hmm.
and noticing that moment when that difference exists between how someone's being treated and what's occurring and an experience that you're having.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about handling that first wave of emotion, noticing that feeling, and then transforming it into something that you can first feel regulated about to then act strategically to bring up those numbers and have those conversations.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for my parents, and it goes back to childhood, right? Like, I think I've always understood the impact of being a Black person in the US, right? Let alone an immigrant, like an immigrant's child in the United States. But really, like, my gender only came to play post college. And so, from as long as I can remember, my parents had always instilled in us, like, hey, like, people may look at you differently or may think that they're better than you because of your race, right? And you can't allow that to show through. You can't, react to that, because you're going to only, validate those claims of, oh, like this person's angry because they're Black, or this person, is getting loud because they're Black, right? And so I think having that ingrained from an early age has always given me the patience to really allow myself to digest situations that are happening to me and to react with a sense of calmness and patience, right? At the end of the day, it's unfair, right? Being treated unequally and seeing that, whether it be you or being a peer, is a really hard emotion to deal with in the moment. But I've been trained on being able to maintain a calm and composed, manner when these things are happening, and being almost like inquisitive to what's going on, right? And so for me, the things that I try to do is I try to like, I try to reflect. I first off try to, put myself in another person's shoes and be like, hey, like, am I actually, are the feelings that I'm perceiving, are these actually, validated feelings, right? Is this something that, is being inferred, or is this actually happening, right? And so really being able to understand the facts versus your feeling is super important. And if there is that room for feeling, right, ask a question like, hey, what did you mean by this? And I think by just being calm and composed and curious, it opens room for the other individual who may actually be coming on from I don't want to say aggressive, but from a negative standpoint, right? To reflect themselves on, hey, what do I mean by this? Because a lot of times these things are inherent and people don't actually know that they are being unfair, or they're, you know, causing a microaggression. That's why they're microaggressions, right? It's almost a status quo. And it's so unfortunate that it's so ingrained in our society. But sometimes having a pattern disrupt is all you need. Like, hey, I don't understand. explain it to me. Like, what are you saying? Right. And having them take a back pedal and think about what they're doing or the action that they're having against you. I think that's really how I try to navigate those situations. But it's definitely hard, right? Like, because our feelings are so valid, but at the same time, I've found that it's better to try and stay composed and stay calm to a situation than to act in your emotion at that moment.
I love that so much. And thank you for sharing that combination of what that looks like because the systemic barriers need to give. But
Mm-hmm.
the only way that they give is through that chicken and an egg situation of being calm, being composed, using curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
and challenging the system in
Mm-hmm.
a way that strategically gives and
Exactly.
that you can leverage all of your strengths and all of the facts to present a case that then works in your favor. And, standing on the shoulders of all of those who've gone before us,
Mm-hmm.
these moments are possible. And it's to note that there were strategies and techniques that they used. Um, and yeah, little by little, we chip away at it. And I'm so, so grateful for everything that you articulated because this is such an important conversation to have. And really, on that note, something else you've talked about is colorism being one of the topics that again, really exists everywhere, but gets named almost nowhere, especially in professional spaces. What have you witnessed or have had to personally navigate? And why has it mattered to really name it out loud and champion those pattern disrupts?
Yeah. Honestly, I think that colorism plays a huge part to why I take the tactics that I do to not react in a response or in a manner that people assume someone who looks like me may react, despite whether it be right or wrong, right? I think there's definite outrage for situations that are, wrong to you. But to your point, right? Like standing and taking down systematic issues really takes a level of strategy to it. Unfortunately, for Black women, especially darker Black women, right? Taller Black women, bigger Black women, we have this stereotype of like, oh, like the loud and angry Black woman, or this is how, violent behavior, this is how they act. I think the further you get from whiteness, unfortunately, right, the more negative those stereotypes against your personality are put on you, whether or not there's legitimacy to, um, that call out. And so for me, I'm always trying to stay in a professional tone. I've had situations where I've been stern and I've had a stern voice, and people have told me, like, why are you raising your voice? And it's like, my voice is the same as yours. Just because you don't enjoy what's coming out of my mouth, you're now telling me that I am being loud, right? Or I'm being disruptive. And so I always try to be mindful of the way that I, come across, because these are things, unfortunately, right, that they try to dock you for when you do show emotion, right? When you do, express yourself honestly, right? Any form of expression is police, and it's there's these assumptions around, negativity towards that, and especially, with myself and other peers of mine who are, of darker complexion, we see more and more that there are these misunderstandings and there's these tone policings and these perceptions of professionalism, even, right? Compared to other women of color who may be lighter than us. And it's a conversation I've had. I have so many, Black and people of friends who are of color who've had different experiences towards how they show up in corporate spaces. One of my great friends, she does marketing over at Nike. She also has a friend who same job, same role as her. And she's a bit darker. My friend is a little bit lighter. She's of mixed race, and so she's half white, a fourth Japanese, and a fourth Black, right? So mixed race. And her other friend is African. I think she's Sudanese, so a little bit darker than my complexion. And they'll wear similar outfits. And one of them will get, police for being unprofessional, whereas my friend, will get complimented for a similar fit. And she's, come to notice this in her own corporate career and, has been able to speak out about like those indifferences. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, it's always something to be aware of. And it impacts you, right? Like, it definitely impacts, the opportunities, it impacts your visibility, and some of it impacts your confidence because you have to have this in your mind, like, hey, how am I coming off? How am I being perceived? And it's hard, but to the point that I mentioned before, you know, really taking the patience and taking the time to try and, be strategic about how you show up in these spaces allows you to fight the battle within and to challenge people in a respectful way so that they can realize that sometimes the actions that they're doing are coming from a place of, colorism, or, womanism, or even racism, right? But it won't happen unless we have the opportunity to have those difficult conversations in the way that unfortunately the oppressors feel safe to have them.
Yes, absolutely. And I cannot agree more. And I'm so, so grateful to chat about it. And really for a woman listening who has felt this, but has never really had the words to describe it, what do you want her to know?
Yeah, I think I want people to know, your feelings are valid. Unfortunately, the world we're in is so unfair. And there's a lot of healing, a lot of work that has to be done across the board. And really, by showing up in your best self, right? And being able to pattern disrupt, being able to challenge the status quo will continue to help that next little girl, right? That next person to show up as their whole self. So honestly, it's a constant fight and a constant battle, but it's one that hopefully in a few generations we won't have to keep fighting.
Yeah, and that's what this fight is for. And I'm so grateful for everything you've shared. And what I found so meaningful from what you talked about is the intentional and deliberate action of installing beliefs that have acted as such a strong filter throughout your life as a gift from your family to really stand in your power. And I think as I was reflecting on what you shared, for anyone listening, if they feel as though they didn't have those beliefs installed, it's never too late, and you can always claim those beliefs and keep practicing those beliefs because beliefs are just the thoughts that you repeat, and it can be the lens through which you're able to see the world, to access that patience, that is unfairly required from some more than others, and to push for a different future. So I'm so glad that we've chatted about all of this, and I would love to continue talking about your career rebrand and redirections, because your LinkedIn tells the story of someone who's continued to level up from account management to sales to founding a company.
Mhm.
But as you shared, pivots don't typically feel clean from the inside. And you've touched upon what one of those first moments of redirection felt like, from changing paths from medicine to a completely new space. But what did each of these level ups feel like? And did it feel like expansions or pivots?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I feel like in the moment, each redirection was so frightening. I will not lie. Even thinking back to, preparing for this conversation and really highlighting out, how I've jumped from one part of an industry to a completely different one. I sometimes think like, how did I get here? Right. Um, I think at the end of the day, with each pivot, um, I've tried to stay with my brand. I've tried to really find and understand, like who I am, what makes me happy, like what are those intrinsic qualities that I gravitate towards. And since I was a little kid, I've always been a people person. I've always wanted to drive impact. Going back home to Nigeria, I'm so thankful that my parents allowed me to see a different world, because there are so many people who lack the opportunity and lack the access that we have here in America. And so I've always held those things close to my heart in everything I do, whether it's trying to be a doctor or going into a sales role or starting my company, has always been about the greater good that I'm bringing with the position that I have. And so with my pivot into entrepreneurship, it actually happened because I had been laid off from my career during the COVID bubble like burst, right? So during the COVID boom, we saw a huge uptick in, individuals moving into tech and being able to rebrand themselves into content creation or marketing, or, doing their own thing, building their own businesses. And then we had a big like burst of that bubble around 2022. And so I was impacted by a layoff from my old company. And during that time of uncertainty, I decided to go back to my roots, and I went back to Nigeria, and I was surrounded by family. And during that time, it was a short-lived layoff, mind you. Like I got a job in like 3 months after that. But during that time, I was like, well, what have I always wanted to do? And I had always wanted to build a business in Nigeria. Every time I would go back in the summers, I would tell my uncles, I tell my grandma, like, I want to do something in this country. I want to see our country move forward. I have all these amazing ideas. I was such a naive little kid, mind you. But at the end of the day, I want to really give Nigerians the opportunity that I have here in America. And so that's when I started building Distrxct. And the goal with that company was to provide an opportunity for micro and small medium businesses to reach clients both in Nigeria and across diaspora networks through like a social media channel. And so we work in a way that allows them to get the access to new customers, the access to revenue, the access to growth. And that pivot felt so organic to who I was forever, as a child, as a teen, even going into my adulthood. I've always had the vision and the goal of doing something greater than myself, which is why I did choose medicine in the beginning, which is why I did choose to go into a sales leadership route. Like I've always had this goal of something that was greater than me. And so pivots are hard. But at the end of the day, right, being I always say the word grounded, but being grounded, right, in who you are, being able to understand again, like, these skill sets that you have had, from early childhood, allows you to rebrand and redirection yourself in a way that's so organic to you that, yeah, it's scary while it's happening, but then as you're getting through it, it just makes sense.
Absolutely. And first, that is such a beautiful story. I am obsessed with that. And secondly, I'm so curious. Rebrands are again such a core part of what the podcast is about. And it really requires that deep sense of self
Mm.
and a strengthening of that relationship with self so that we can tease these skill sets out in moments of crisis or in moments of ease when we're maybe progressing from one thing to another. But as you shared, they it can feel really, really challenging. And I'm just so curious for maybe someone coming in who is either in a moment of hardship where they really need to tease those things out, or they're cruising along in their own careers, just wanting to be proactive about a potential rebrand or just to know what those inherent skill sets are, especially in this age where layoffs are more and more prominent and maybe just around the corner for so many people. What has your experience been of being able to pull on those threads and tell a story that can work on new audiences? Because you built something that's so special and is in a completely new area, and it required a different skill set to sales. There was a component of selling yourself. However, it required talking to a new audience. How did you go about first teasing out those skill sets and then being able to talk about it?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is understanding, you know, the intention, right? I think there's a big difference in when we are between a rock and a hard place, right? Being intentional and being like reactional. I don't know if that's a word, but intention versus reaction, right? Like what am I moving towards? Why am I going towards this? These are some of the questions that you really have to tease out early on for everything that you do, right? Like, is this a trend that I'm seeing? Am I doing this because my friends have businesses? Am I really passionate about this, or is it just something that might make me a lot of money, right? And like all answers are valid, right? But I think really understanding the intention behind every decision that you make is that first step, to really helping lunge you forward to be successful with what you're doing. And then once you have like a clear pool and you're aligned to, yourself and that intention, you can articulate and then you can go forward with a sense of, assurance into what you're doing, right? Truth be told, I have zero formal training in being an entrepreneur, like none. I took maybe a few business classes. I've thankfully been opportunity to be around some of the smartest people through, my corporate career. But me personally, I've never built a product from scratch. I've never gone from zero to one. I had no clue what it meant to, file out tax forms or understand the legalities of what this might look like. But because I knew the intention of what I wanted to do, which was to help um less fortunate individuals in my home country to really opportune themselves with new networks and businesses and to really blossom, that allowed me to have the motivation and the pull towards being able to figure it out, right? Through networking, through interacting with others, through even selling myself. And hey, like I know these things. Like I'm good at selling. I'm good at, managing a team. I understand, quota attainment. I know go to market strategy. What I don't know is how to build a product. So how am I going to do that? How can I either do it myself or how can I influence others into my mission to join what I'm trying to do? I think by having a clear understanding, by having that intentionality, people can see that. And that gravitates individuals into the cause that you're doing. And that allows you to open these doors that you never thought that you could open.
I love that so much. And I'm so curious, as you walked on that path with a clear intention, how did you navigate any potential hidden curriculums from
Mm-hmm.
these new spaces? The words and the lingo
Yeah.
that people in these different spaces were using to essentially have shared language so that when they heard your intention and they felt the emotion, they could also map it with the buzzwords that perhaps they're used to hearing. How did you go about navigating that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm thankful that I've been in some of these corporate tech spaces where I hear them from time to time, right? But really, it's diving headfirst from, taking on your own learnings, doing a lot of like YouTube and Google searches, going to different networking events, hearing other people. A good majority of my time going into market was spent doing market research. So I took multiple trips to Nigeria to not just speak the tech language of individuals, right? But also speak the day-to-day language of these businesses that I'm going to be supporting because like they don't care about cloud technology. They don't care about AI. They care about dollars in their pockets, right? And so for them, they have a completely different understanding, a completely different, value to what they're trying to achieve. And it's really just being at the forefront of these learnings because you won't know everything. Doesn't even matter if you're in a space that is very familiar to you or that you studied for so long. There's always going to be someone who knows something that you don't. And so with each opportunity to get in front of that individual, you're trying to take a bit of that knowledge with you. And just the continuation of that has allowed me to continue to speak a little bit more confidence with every conversation or to pull from another shared experience. Like, hey, I heard this from this business owner. Are you facing similar problems? Or from a VC conversation, I see a lot of VCs who are finally, breaching into Africa and they don't know what they're doing because it's a new market, right? And so they're looking for individuals to almost be that translator between the, African lingo and this corporate lingo, right? And so by doing all of this work, taking your research, taking your time, you're able to navigate between the two and really have great conversations that really push things forward.
That is so beautiful. And again, for the person listening who doesn't have those foundational beliefs installed yet, I would love to tease out some of those core beliefs that have helped you navigate this. Because I've been hearing it as you've spoken, something along the lines of I'm I'm able to do market research, I'm able to be a translator, things like that. What other beliefs have really propelled you on this new journey? Because I think those can be so profound in making a difference of confidence, of being able to have these different conversations, of knowing, yes, I can have a conversation and then iterate on the next one, and I just have to keep going. I would love to hear your thoughts on those ones, just from what you just heard yourself say.
Yeah, totally. I think the biggest thing for me is I had to get rid of my ego. Again, like I think all like pros and cons of, coming from the family background that I did come from. But one of the cons to it was, you never felt like you couldn't not have the answer. I hate a double negative, but it never felt safe to not know something when I grew up, when I was growing up. Like I was always expected to know. I was always expected to be one of the smartest kids in the room, right? We have this thing in Nigeria, specifically among Igbo people. It's like, Nigeria no they carry last, meaning like a Nigerian should never be last, right? Like we should always be in the forefront. We should always be a top student. We should always be the best at whatever we're doing. And that comes with time. Like you're never going to start something and from day one be a prodigy. Like that's just not reality. And so I literally had to kill my ego in order to embrace and to grow in this space. Um, and that came with a bunch of imposter syndrome, like further down the line, where it's like, well, do I belong in the rooms that I've worked so hard to come into? And it's like, you have to again kill that ego and realize like, hey, like you really do belong here and you've made an intentional effort to grow and to develop yourself and to learn, and you're still learning. It's a continuous journey. And there are going to be those bad days, but you constantly put one foot in front of the other, right? And so I think that has been the biggest thing for me that has really drawn an impact to the way that I am showing up, right? Is like having to kill, this sense of, I need to know everything now because it's not true. Some of the smartest people in the room are the individuals who listen, who are inquisitive, who are able to say like that they don't truly know, right? And then they're willing to learn. I think that's been just such an honor being, mentored and shaped into that mentality, because for a long time I was always afraid of like not having the answer on my fingertip, or not, being caught with my pants down, right? Like not being able to know something right away. And there's this skill and there's this grace in almost transparency of, hey, like I'm still growing, I'm still learning. Give me an opportunity to learn, right? In every conversation you have, someone is giving you an opportunity to learn.
That is so wonderful to hear. And what I heard also was the sense of I stand in my power even when I do not know,
Mhm.
and I stand in my power despite not knowing, and it is safe to not know. And to me, that is how I kill my ego, and really feeling the words of that in my body to then take a deep breath and take the next step forward toward whatever needs to be done, because we're all constantly figuring it out. And what I've loved about what you shared is you've talked about success being this combination of identity, alignment, and ownership, and not just performance. And it could be just really hard to think about solely our performance without each of these other pieces. What has this meant for you in practice, and how and where did you learn that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really shifted when I realized that, confidence isn't, to your point, right? Isn't the proof of like the metrics or the outcome, but confidence comes from your ownership. And what you own how you show up each and every day, right? It goes back to really like my foundations of creating impact and owning that impact that I want to create every single day. And instead of sitting in a sense of doubt, right, being able to navigate um that doubt into curiosity. And so I think that's been the biggest thing, and how I own it is really being able to show up in a way that I'm allowing the space to continue to grow, right? Um, and really being able to sit in the identity of and really being able to like sit and understand the identity of who I'm becoming. So those I would say those have been the things that I've always had to reflect on in terms of being able to pull out from like the result oriented brain that we're all so focused on and like, hey, like what's the outcome, or am I hitting these success metrics, or even that comparison brain of this person did this in this timeline, right? Because I didn't do this, I'm failing. It's like, no, like you are the owner of your own timeline. And what are the steps that you're owning to get to your goal?
That is so beautiful. And there's so many gems that you shared in there that I definitely am going to journal on and think about and yeah, continue to feel into my body to really bring that energy up and embody it in real life to take on that ownership. I've loved how you've described taking ownership of your entrepreneurship journey with Distrxct. And I'd love to learn more about specifically the funding and building journey, truly just the real version of what that looked like and how you thought about and approached all of that.
Mhm. Well, to be honest, there were a lot of bumps in the road. It was definitely not a linear path. From product ideation to launch took around 2-ish years. And it took an additional maybe 5 months before we got our first round of funding, which we actually got in January. It's a great start to my new year. So thank you for that. And so honestly, like to the point that I've been talking about the whole time, right? Like for me, coming into this role as an entrepreneur, as a founder, was something that I truly took ownership of from my own point of view. I am a non-technical founder who literally dove headfirst into solving a problem with a technical solution, right? But also it's a problem that really requires a non-technical touch to it because we are at the forefront of so many business owners, so many consumers, and these people have real problems that they don't speak the tech language, right? And so they need someone like me who can really understand the pain points that they have and translate them into a product that works for them. Um, and so, really, where do I even start? Like, really, like when I first started this journey, it was a lot of understanding that landscape and understanding what are the opportunities available, especially within a system that doesn't necessarily have the mobile penetration that America has or that Western, countries have. Maybe it doesn't have the constant power that constant like these places have. So I couldn't come to it with a technical solution that worked for individuals in Western countries because it wasn't for individuals in Western countries. So that was the first thing, was really understanding the nuances of the geographical region that I wanted to support. And then from there it was really being able to evangelize on this idea. And so because I knew my own limitations, I knew I needed to collaborate with someone who maybe had the technical capacity but didn't necessarily have the strategic brain that I did, and we need to collaborate together to build something greater than the both of us. And so I'm so thankful for really being able to enable and bring to the forefront one of my co-founders who is also an amazing person. Shigden's awesome. And for him, he works at Amazon. And he was looking to do something greater than, but didn't really have that like savvy boots on the ground kind of mentality that I did. He was very comfortable coding, very comfortable with building something, very comfortable like that 0 to 1, but he didn't understand people the way that I did. And so we worked together, we evangelized on what the impact of what we wanted to bring was. And we iterated and iterated, and then we finally got a product, like literally 2 years later. And then with that product, the issue that we had is number one, we're building a solution for a country and for a region that is underrepresented, first of all, and then to some degree undervalued, right? But the truth of the matter is, number one, Nigeria is one of the fastest growing economies in all of Africa. Number two, half of Nigeria's GDP comes from micro and small medium enterprises. Unlike the US, where the majority of our wealth comes from the 1%, right? These really micro, big companies, right? So it was such an interesting thing to really talk to investors and really educate them on the opportunity that we had right in front of us. I think the third biggest thing was with the climate of Nigeria. We're going through a digital transformation, one that we saw in the US in the late 90s, early 2000s. Nigeria is currently going through that right now. Many parts of Africa are going through that right now. We're seeing increased mobile penetration, and we have a population that is really young. The majority of Nigeria's population is under 30. And what does that mean? It means that we have this like Gen Z, like, Gen X, like kind of where we are, right? Situation where so many people are looking towards technology and technological based solutions as an answer compared to, maybe like our grandmothers or our, great grandmothers who were more, do it yourself kind of people or more, trade focused kind of individuals. And so by doing this sense of enablement, we've been able to work with, a few angel investors to give us that opportunity to have a fighting chance and to prove out and to value out, the product that we're building because it is risky, right? Like there are so many things that we have had to overcome compared to some of our peers in, more safe markets. And with AI being a forefront to, everything that people are building right now, having a, you know, almost like a B2C, people first platform just isn't as trendy, but it's so necessary for the people that we're serving to. And so by being able to really speak from a personal level as a Nigerian in the diaspora, understanding the problem that we're trying to solve, evangelize and bringing people into this project with no pay, mind you. I'm so thankful to my team that I have now. Like none of us have been paid for this. We really have been bootstrapped up until recently, where we just got our funding on something because we all truly believe in the opportunity and the impact of what we're doing.
That is so incredible. And for the little Stephanie listening who had no idea maybe on how to talk to angel investors or how to even find angel investors, what would you tell her? So, say she has this incredible idea, she has a co-founder, she's been doing the research, all those things, but she needs that funding. How did you go about even thinking about that? How were you asking questions, leveraging your network, all of those things?
I would tell her every no leads you closer to a yes. Every no is an opportunity to understand how to position yourself for a better conversation with the next opportunity and to really pitch and polish into that yes that you're going to get. Because I wish I did count, but it was countless no's. When I tell you it was not just one conversation, it was a multitude of conversations, a multitude of no's, a multitude of ghosted VC or even, grant opportunities that were focused on, these initiatives before I was able to get my first yes. But all you need is one yes. And that one yes is going to give you the opportunity to really prove and validate yourself in this, in this space. And I'm so thankful that I got that yes.
I love that. And I'm so thankful that you kept pushing and kept going. And I'm so excited to see what you continue to build.
Thank
And
you.
I'm wondering, in balancing your career at Google, as well as building this company, how have you navigated not shrinking any part of who you are and just holding all of it with so much love?
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely, I don't know if balance is even the right word. It's definitely a seesaw. It's not really balancing, but it's intentional energy management. There are going to be days, there are going to be periods where like I do have to focus a lot of my time here in my corporate role because like this is what pays my bills. And this allows me to also put a lot of investment of my own money into what I'm building and what I'm so passionate about. And so it's not one thing takes priority over another, but it really is a juggling act between the two. I will say though, I am continuously grateful for being at a company like Google, where so many people inspire me to continue to push forward with my startup venture. Had direct leadership who has given me advice and feedback. I've had great conversations with leaders who have literally directed me to VCs and to opportunities to reach out to. And I walk with a clear purpose that, I am a part of a corporate organization that not only wants me to succeed here, but wants me to succeed in life. And the part of that life is, my project is Distrxct, right? And so I know that not everyone has that opportunity and not everyone has, that that grace and the support system. But I'm just very thankful that Google does give me that space, and I am surrounded by so many smart individuals who have done similar things, or they have friends who are doing similar things, and they're so willing to give me access to their network and continue to allow me to grow in a way that I never thought would be possible.
That is so incredible. And I'm just so grateful that you shared all of this. And I feel so lit up and inspired. So thank you so much. And I would love to dive in to the rapid fire round if you're ready.
Of course, this is such a good conversation.
So my first question is, what does wellness mean to you today?
uh, Wellness, it really aligning mind, body, and spirit. Being able to understand when one of those three may be feeling a little bit off, and then what you can do to like rejuvenate yourself, right? I think it goes well beyond the body, right? Even your soul, right? Being able to understand and to feed the different parts of you allows you to holistically feel well.
That is so, so good. My next question is, what does leadership mean to you today?
Ooh, leadership. I think leadership is ownership. I've been so thankful to be in roles where I've been a blanking on the word here. It's a, I've I think leadership goes beyond, being in a position where like you're a manager or you're a VP, but it's the way that you embody these traits, ownership, accountability, elevating others to the opportunity. So I've been a leader through my role and through my title. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a founder, but I've also been a leader through the way I show up for others when I don't actually have the power towards decision making, or I don't have the power to truly, lead the situation. I think that's really what leadership is. It's really being able to be a servant to others and to show up and to be accountable for others and to yourself.
I love that so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think, this has been such a great conversation, Ricky, and you've had so many great questions that I've loved answering and telling my story on. And for anyone listening, I'd love to just share, life is full of challenges and changes. And as long as you continue to embrace who you are, and as long as you're continuing to stand in your power, like there is nothing stopping you from success.
I love that so much. Thank you for everything that you shared, your wisdom, and for just continuing to persevere and to really be the icon that you are. And I'm so grateful to have had you on.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been so great. And I can't wait to be back for round two.
Yes.